UFC 304 in Manchester, England is going to be the tale of two rematches. First, we have the heavyweights, Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes. Now, of course, their initial matchup ended prematurely when Tom went to kick Curtis and wound up injuring himself and had to stop. So technically, Curtis Blaydes walked away with the W from that match, but it was somewhat certainly unsatisfying in terms of just how the fight played out. So in this rematch, Curtis does have a couple of factors in his favor. One, he's very explosive, and he seems to love that blast double takedown, which he's very effective with. And then once he gets his opponent on the ground, Curtis is very heavy-handed and is typically able to get somebody out of there with just ground and pound heavy blows to the head. Curtis Blaydes is not really the type of fighter that often goes for submission on the ground, but it seems like he doesn't really have to. He definitely has a lot of size and power advantage over a number of his opponents. Now, he's not necessarily the greatest striker coming from a wrestling background, but I'll give him this much. He's surprisingly explosive and smooth for somebody who looks pretty stiff when he's doing mitt work. Just from the few little clips of watching him do mitts with his trainer, I'd have to critique Curtis and say, hey, you're a little bit too stiff, let your punches go. But then once he gets in the ring and it's the real thing, he does actually loosen up a little bit and let his hands go pretty effectively. Mind you, he's sort of running forward at his opponent while he does so, but he's much looser in a live fight than he is in the gym on the floor. The other thing to bear in mind with Curtis Blaydes is he did in fact knock out Alistair Overeem, who is a world-class striker. We could perhaps argue that maybe Overeem was already well past his prime when he stepped in there versus Curtis Blaydes, but nevertheless, Curtis was able to be a world-class striker, so I would assume he's got that level of confidence under his belt. Overall, however, I would have to give Tom Aspinall the advantage in terms of the striking game, simply because Tom is able to put a variety of punches together in terms of classic boxing combinations, and Tom also has very effective kicks, both low kicks and kicks to the head. He's also very smooth with his counter punching and counter techniques. On the ground, once they're on the ground, I would definitely give the advantage to Tom Aspinall, just simply because he's got a higher level of a submission game in terms of his jiu-jitsu. But the question is that sort of middle ground where Curtis is highly effective with his blast double and getting his opponents from standing to the ground and landing in top position. So the key for Tom is going to be able to stuff those takedowns or counter them or spin off or just stay out of range. Overall, though, I feel that Tom Aspinall has more advantages in more departments than Curtis Blaydes. Okay, so let's move on to the main event, which is also a rematch of Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad. Now, of course, their first matchup also ended rather unfortunately with an injury. Leon Edwards had an accidental eye poke, and Belal was forced to stop. Now, Edwards versus Muhammad is the classic striker versus grappler matchup, with Leon having a highly developed strike game and Belal having a very strong wrestling background. So we'll start standing up, since the fight starts standing up, and certainly here I feel that Leon has the much bigger advantage as a striker. Now, the interesting thing here to note is that Leon does not fight the same way another world-class striker, Stephen Thompson, fought or fights. Even though Stephen Thompson is a world-class striker, I felt that his style kind of put him at a disadvantage when he fought Belal in the smaller cage at the apex. And that's because Stephen likes to kind of back up to counter-strike and in a smaller cage you can only back up so much, and then you're against the cage, and that's certainly what Belal took advantage of in that fight. He was able to press Stephen up against the cage, close distance, and then just grind him against the cage and then on the ground. In fact, that's definitely one of Belal's strengths, is he's willing to absolutely grind it out. Once he gets somebody against the cage, he'll secure at least one arm, have his other hand free, and continue to strike and just stay heavy on his opponent. Eventually, if he gets him down on the ground, same thing. He's happy to just stay in half guard and not try to advance that position, and just strike his opponent with one hand, and maintain that top half guard position. Belal doesn't seem to be someone who wants to go in for a quick sub on the ground. Now, the two main weaknesses I can think, or one main weakness in terms of striking for Belal, is that he doesn't move his head off the center line. In fact, he still has that wrestling habit of leaning over his lead foot. So that means he's somewhat immobile, because all the weight on the lead foot just means you're somewhat cemented in place for at least a moment. And that's kind of what you want to do when you're a wrestler, but it doesn't help with your mobility in the ring if you're trying to set up strikes or evade somebody else's strikes. Leon, on the other hand, is a very dynamic, very smooth, I would almost have to say instinctive striker. His footwork is terrific. He likes to fight not at a far distance like Stephen Thompson, but at a little closer distance, which is great, because then he has less distance to close if he wants to move in to get somebody on the ground. Now, in terms of fighting against the cage and on the ground, a classic wrestler will, like DC, will say that Leon makes mistakes, like he shouldn't have done this and he shouldn't have done that move, because that's not what a wrestler would do. But the interesting thing with Leon is he's pretty athletic, so even if he does something that's incorrect in terms of conventional wrestling, he's able to recoup and rebound from whatever position he winds up putting himself in. Now, the main factor here in this Edwards-Muhammad matchup or rematch is the factor of their mindsets. And in this case, I think Leon Edwards has the far superior mindset walking into the cage than Belal Muhammad. And that's mainly because Belal is still living in the past. He still can't get over the eye poke and what if, and he feels that if that hadn't happened, then this would have happened and that would have happened. But Leon's moved on from that matchup. Leon has fought and beaten Kamaru Usman twice. First time in devastating fashion with that one head kick right at the end of the match, when he was already, down arguably and losing the fight. So I think that did wonders for Leon's confidence in himself. He was able to get the decision victory in the rematch with Kamaru. So, if he knows in his heart he's capable of beating somebody on Kamaru's level, I don't think he's going to be intimidated by someone at Belal's level. Now, by the same token, I sure hope he doesn't sleep on Belal or take that for granted. But I will assume that as a champion, Leon has put in his due diligence in terms of all his preparation, and that I expect him to come out victorious versus Belal Muhammad tonight. Perhaps even inside of 3 rounds. If not, he should be able to get that unanimous decision victory. So who do you guys have winning tonight in the co-main and main events? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening.